Hey folks, welcome to the Cardboard Cave. Here to start a new series. I just came up with the idea today. I mean, not that it's anything original, but decided to go for it. So what I'm going to do, I've been flooding this channel with unboxings of Godzilla action figures and board games and everything I can get my hands on. Even a video game review for the NES game. What I haven't done is talked a whole lot about the movies. So real quick backstory. Growing up, I'm a 40-year-old man, but was aware of Godzilla. I think for many years I've been aware of like the cultural significance of the original Godzilla, but I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to be a pretender here. The first Godzilla movie I saw as a teenager myself was the 1998 Matthew Broderick Godzilla. The first American Godzilla, the huge box office flop that Toho kind of famously has even made fun of. Doesn't really even consider that Godzilla real Godzilla. But that's the first one I saw. For what it was worth, I enjoyed it at the time, but I've never watched it since. I saw it in the theater, and that was the last time. And I believe I've come to the conclusion that Pacific Rim, which I saw in the theater, is as close as I've come to a Godzilla movie until Godzilla Minus One, which I saw in the theater and loved. Bought the 4K Blu-ray, loved it at home. I've done a ranking, spoiler alert, I guess, if you want to go back and watch my video, where I rated my favorite movie from each of the last 5 years. Godzilla Minus One was my favorite movie of 2023. That's how much I love it. But Godzilla 1998 Minus One, that's a pretty big spread there. So something clicked inside my brain. I got Godzilla fever. I've been buying toys like crazy. And I bought the Criterion collection of the entire Showa era, which is the first 15 Godzilla movies. I think it might be 16 if you count the one Americanized one. So 15 plus from 1954 to 1975. So 21 years of Godzilla movies. I'm going to start with those, and I'll continue after that if anybody enjoys these videos. I mean, I'm going to continue after that anyways, watching them. But I decided I'm just going to start watching them. Maybe it's not the best way, but I'm going to start from the start. I've always meant to watch the original Godzilla, so that was a no-brainer. And what I'm going to do, I might make something nicer. I just scribbled here. I'm going to make a tier list from S tier, A, B, C, D, all the way to F, which you know what a tier list is. Basically, S tier is an incredible film experience, and F is so bad it's not even funny. Like F was one of the worst movies ever. And we'll see where they land. Now, this is going to be tricky for me because I'm a noob. I'm a Godzilla noob for all intents and purposes. And just starting, like, how do you rank this movie when you're not seeing all the other Godzilla movies? I'm going to go with my gut, and then I'm going to switch them around as I want to. And when this is all over, we're going to rank all 15 Showa era movies. I'm going to do a final video, like, showing the final ranking. But I'm going to do these in chunks. I thought about doing it one at a time, but I'm going to do it in chunks. For this first video, I'm going to do the first two, kind of three. What I mean by that is I'm going to do the original 1954 Godzilla, which I watched, of course, in Japanese, from the Criterion collection, as authentic of an experience as I could. And then I'm going to do the 1955 sequel, Godzilla Raids Again, of course. And then the other one I'm going to do is the 1956 Americanized version of the original Godzilla, which is kind of a bonus, but I'm going to include it in this rank because it was made during the Showa era, and it is 75% Godzilla, the original. So we're going to do these three. Again, those movies are Godzilla, 1954, Godzilla Raids Again, 1955, and then Godzilla King of the Monsters, which is the 1956 Americanized Godzilla. So let's start with the original. I'm going to give as quick as I can. My friend Johnny likes to make fun of me. I'm not capable of really doing things quickly, it seems. But as quickly as I can, I'm going to break down my thoughts. Now, I'm going to give my honest opinions on these, not based on what I feel like everybody else wants me to say. But at the same time, I'm acknowledging the fact that these movies, the original Godzilla, is almost 71 years old now. 70 years old. So, of course, I'm not going to compare it in every area against like Godzilla Minus One, which we will get to that one eventually, but I'm not going to do it as part of the ranking until we get to it in chronological order. So I'm acknowledging the fact that movies were different 70 years ago, whether they're made in Japan or here. But I'm also just going to be honest about today, how do I feel about it as a noob who doesn't have the nostalgia. So there's no nostalgia glasses for these, for better or worse. So 1954, Godzilla, the original, the classic movie that came out not very long after the end of World War II. And I just want to start with that. It amazes me that Japan even had a movie industry in 1954 when you consider what happened at the end of World War II. I think that's incredible in itself. And they were able to put out, I'm sure they put out many classics if I would dive deeper into Japanese cinema, but a movie that's been considered a classic for so long, for decades and decades, so soon after World War II, that's just amazing to me. It was made for, from best I can tell, the equivalent of 900,000 US dollars, which is somewhere around $10 million today, which, funny enough, is pretty close to what Godzilla Minus One was made for, you know, once you adjust for inflation. That's just amazing. For comparison, Hasbro's Battleship cost the equivalent of $280 million. It was $200 million in 2012, which is like $288 million, I think is what I looked up today, compared to the equivalent of $10 million today for the original Godzilla. The fact they were able to do so much. So, as a movie, it sets up the setting and the background right away. As far as spoilers, I mean, these movies are all so old. I'm not going to avoid spoilers. I guess I should mention that. I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure for these older Godzilla movies if it really ruins anything. But at the same time, I understand if you're like me and waited way too long to watch the original Godzilla, I am going to spoil story points. But I think it's totally worth watching, whether you know what's going to happen or not. But I think they did a good job setting up the characters so that you care what's happening. You got the lovebirds, the love triangle, which threw me off a little bit at first. And I'm epically bad with names, so I'm not even going to try. But the scientist, Shirazawa. See, I don't even want to try. The love triangle, for me, not necessary, but also it set up a human interest. It set up a human story. But it didn't go too far with that. Like, the focus was still on this peril at hand, this Godzilla. And I think my favorite thing about the whole movie is just the seriousness of it. And I know this is going to change quickly as I go through these Godzilla movies, but it was just taken so seriously, even though, of course, Godzilla is a man in a suit. Of course, a lot of the destruction is models. And to be honest with you, today you can totally tell. Like, that helicopter, every time I see it, it's hard not to just see like a Matchbox toy or like a train size model. It's clearly a model being blown in the wind. But I also love that. The ingenuity. Like, there were no CGI effects in 1954. So the way they were able to do it by just building models and using practical effects. The fact that the military has terrible aim for practical reasons. Because that man in the Godzilla suit, kudos to him, by the way. This is an incredible story if you read about everything he went through. Not just him, but other actors who've taken the suits. Burns and electrocution and you name it, passing out. But it was a flammable suit, so they didn't want every missile to connect because they're using real pyrotechnics. So the fact that the military misses most of the shots, but when you know why, it almost kind of adds to it. So I guess what I'm saying is, for the original Godzilla, there has to be an understanding that this movie is 70 plus years old. Before computer graphics. And there's times you can totally tell it with your 2025 modern eye. But I feel like I'm able to transport myself back a little bit to the time when it was made and see how this was a pretty darn terrifying movie for people, for a society that was, less than a decade, just a handful of years outside of mass destruction from atomic weapons. And here, the whole theme of Godzilla is, The H-bomb is basically what created him. I mean, it's a harsh lesson, and I think I said my favorite thing about it was how serious it takes itself. And to delve into that a little more, my favorite thing about the original Godzilla movie, besides creating the character of Godzilla, is that I don't feel like it's poking fingers. Like, it's not an anti-American movie. At least I didn't take it that way. It's kind of holding a mirror up and saying, as humanity, we've made mistakes. We've gone too far. We've pushed things too far. We've kind of forced things to go down a certain path that we weren't ready for. And although Godzilla is a monster and totally fictional, it doesn't feel fictional. You know, it doesn't feel fictional when you're watching it. And that's the seriousness of it. The music is incredible. I mean, the original Godzilla theme is in here. That was still used to great effect in -1 and a lot of other ones, I'm sure, too. Just an incredible... I love the Godzilla theme so much, but all the music is so good. That song that the school children sing, that gets the scientist to change his mind, Serizawa. Really good stuff. As far as any negatives, mostly the negatives I think would be down to the era that it came out. Like some of the acting, I mean, I don't speak Japanese, you know, I'm watching the subtitles, but some of it seemed strange to me, like the main female lead, her facial expressions, like, is she about to cry? Is she laughing? Like, this thing's really serious. It threw me off a little bit, but I think that's down to culture, down to time period. Movies were just different then. Like, you watch Hollywood movies from the 50s. People just acted differently. It was like broader strokes. Not worse, just different. But some of the acting threw me off a little bit. Like, what vibe are they going for here? But overall, excellent. And, of course, the special effects from a 1954 movie, some of them look strange. I mean, sometimes it's so obvious that it's a man in a suit. But overall, the destruction scenes in the first Godzilla were just done so well. And they didn't overdo it, but they gave you enough. Like, they got the balance right off the bat. Director is Ishiro Honda. I told myself I wasn't going to say names, but I believe it's Ishiro Honda. Forgive me if I got the name wrong. He understood the balance of destruction versus human story, quiet moments and action, and I think it's great. I think the ending, I won't go over all the details of the ending, but, well, you know, I think it makes as much sense as any Godzilla movie, at least that I'm aware of, the way that it was explained. Here's our oxygen destroyer here. Oh, I was going to show Super 7 reaction figures, the little 3.75-inch figures for everyone that I have. I thought about, what should I show? Should I show the Blu-ray disc? It's like, I don't know. So here's our little 1954 Godzilla Super 7 reaction figure. He's black and white. Not a perfect representation of him in the movie, but a pretty good one. Because I think the monster himself in the original was kind of creepy. Never outright goofy, but at times could verge on, like his eyes are looking in different directions, could verge on a little corny looking, but also a little creepy. Like, and I think that is the defining characteristic of this first Godzilla. And the ending seems quite definitive, which is interesting when you know there's so many other Godzilla movies. But let's move on. Oh, so F tier all the way to S tier. I mean, it's hard not to put the original Godzilla in S tier, honestly. Yeah, I've got to. It's not perfect, but for the time it came out, I simply cannot find flaw with it. So Godzilla 1954. I'll redo this to look better. Maybe I won't. S tier, Godzilla 1954. Next is Godzilla Raids Again. And I got this crazy glow-in-the-dark version. But here's their version of the Raids Again Godzilla, 1955. And I think they did a pretty good job. Let's just start with that. In the close-up shots, I think 1955 Godzilla Raids Again, the direct sequel, not directed by the same director, a new director, came out just a year later. I did not realize that until I watched it. It's like, oh, wow, this was 55. So also a 70-year-old movie. The close-up shots of Godzilla are a little rough. He just has an ugly look to him. Like he's got stuff sticking out of his face, some gnarly teeth. The close-up suit, I believe it was actually a puppet, I heard. Like when you just see his head like this. Like my own face is a little rough when you see it up close. But the full body suit, when they showed the fights, looks great. I love the way 55 Godzilla looks for the big fights and stuff. It's just when they show only like from here, it's like, ew, he's a little rough looking. Not in a good way. But 55 Godzilla also marks the first time we had a fight against another monster. Anguirus, or I believe I'm saying that sort of right. Anguirus is, here's a Super 7 reaction, glow-in-the-dark version. His defining characteristic, these spikes, that even in toy form are a little uncomfortable. With the man in a suit who had to be on all fours right off the bat there, giving those guys in the suit a rough job. So I need to be quick with this one. 55 Godzilla. Godzilla Raids Again. What did I not like? Let me start with that. I made some notes here because there's a little bit to say about this one, but I didn't want to take forever. So basically, I said it's the first fight against another monster, and those fights are good looking, except they're sped up. And they're a little bit corny because they're so sped up. And I read, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, please. I read that the director wanted the fights to be slowed down, not sped up. But the person who, I guess, wound the camera did it too tight. I don't know the film lingo. Did something wrong. And so instead of being slowed down, the fight was like this. So like here would be, this is great. I hope my wife doesn't walk in and see me doing this. So if a normal fight would be like, that, they're like, I mean, you get it. That's the dumbest thing ever done. But it looked kind of funny because they were sped up. But apparently the director saw this mistake and actually thought it looked pretty cool. So he decided to go with it. I would rather have seen it either normal motion or slowed down. I thought it looked a little weird. But besides that, the fights were so cool. When they were destroying the castle in Osaka, I believe it was Osaka. Oh man, it looks so good. Like some of the things they did in this one, I feel they learned lessons from the first Godzilla, because some of the destruction scenes I think looked even more convincing. Like there's some things like I could tell they were overlaying a graphical effect. Like when they were shooting missiles at Godzilla, instead of missing every single shot, they would like do some kind of a lens effect where it looks like it's hitting them, but you could tell it's not actually hitting the guy in the suit. Things like that, I think they improved. I just loved the monster battles. Now, spoiler alert, poor Anguirus here, or Anguirus, I think it's Anguirus, doesn't make it past about the first third of the movie. But it's a good third of the movie, and he's fun. So I was like, well, where's the movie going to go from here? And overall, I just enjoyed the setting a lot, like the fishing company theme. And this is new to me. I mean, I assume it's based on real life. I mean, I know the fishing industry historically has been absolutely essential for Japan. But I did not realize there were pilots who were flying above the ocean, spotting schools of fish and directing the ships where to go. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. And that's sort of the whole human plot of this movie. It focuses on these two pilots. And I think that's just cool. I've never seen a movie about that. And I didn't expect the second Godzilla movie to be so focused on the fishing industry. I just found that interesting. So I enjoyed the setting. Overall, I enjoyed the characters. I liked the two pilots quite a bit. The one that was... how far do I want to go spoilers? The one who was not with the girl. Like there's the one who's with the girl, and then there's the other one. He calls himself the groom, I think it is. Which is kind of a funny thing. I thought maybe it was a little bit lost in translation, but it's just a nickname. He has some funny facial expressions sometimes when I wonder if maybe it was not supposed to be funny. Because again, overall, this is a pretty serious movie. Like, I don't think this is meant to be taken as comedy. Sometimes his facial expressions seemed a little strange to me, but I loved his character anyways. And overall, I really liked all the acting in the movie. I enjoyed it a lot. I did think they focused too much on the humans sometimes. Sometimes I wanted them to pull back a little bit and focus on, Godzilla more. But overall, the human part was well done. I just think the first Godzilla got the focus right. As far as Godzilla and humans, this one I feel like a little too much humans, a little too little Godzilla. But still pretty good balance overall. The ending, how many times do they shoot that mountain? That felt to me almost like my film was broken and like it was just repeating the same thing over and over. If you've seen it, you know. They shoot missiles into this mountain, and I won't give away the reasons why, even though the movie's 70 years old. But they're shooting missiles into this mountain. And oh my goodness, the same shot of the same clearly model airplane shooting missiles into this mountain. It was a little bit overdone. But I thought, it kind of made Godzilla seem like not all that smart. Like, I thought Godzilla could have gotten away. I don't think the way they dealt with Godzilla was as clever as the first movie with the oxygen destroyer. But it wasn't bad. And it kind of gave you the sense that, hey, these people have barely rebuilt after the first Godzilla attack. They're just doing the best they can. This is not a perfect plan. And it may not even kill Godzilla, but at least it's going to slow him down. And so I give it a free pass for that reason. Like, I don't think you're supposed to think it's some brilliant plan. It's more just humans getting by doing what they do. And that's sort of the theme of this movie to me, as a dumb, ignorant American 70 years later. If the first movie was a cautionary tale about the H-bomb and weapons of mass destruction and pushing things too far, this is sort of felt like a movie about just trying to rebuild and choosing to focus on the good. Like, there's a whole long scene in this movie where the humans are all just laughing and having a good time after they lost everything. And it felt a little off at first, but I thought, in a way, it's kind of beautiful. It may be telling of a different time and a different culture. So I think that's the way it was meant to be taken. Like, they're choosing to still have life and be vibrant and just be human despite the destruction. Overall, I know this movie doesn't have the best reputation. I think I liked it a lot more than a lot of people do. I know there's mixed opinions. Some people really love this one. A lot of people don't. It was not as perfect. Godzilla Raids Again was not as perfect as the movie that came out just a year prior, the original. But I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. There was too much on the human side. The close-ups of Godzilla were ugly. But the fights, when the whole bodysuit, were great. Oh, also, in these fights, they fight like animals. And that's something that I don't think they really kept for most of the Godzilla movies. They're biting each other's necks and clawing at each other. In other words, they're fighting like wild animals, not like men in suits or robots. And I think maybe that's something they kind of lost along the way, because that surprised me, having just seen snippets of Godzilla movies through the years, how much they're just biting at each other and gnawing at each other. But yeah, Godzilla is pretty cool in this movie, and I thought Anguirus put up a good fight. Where would I rate it? It's not perfect. Like I said, the ending stretched on too long. Too much focus on humans, not quite enough on Godzilla. A few just awkward scenes, frankly. But overall, I love the setting. I love the fights. It's a shame about the whole fast motion thing. I don't think that holds up great. It'll be hard for some people to take the fight seriously because of that. But it didn't ruin it for me. It was notable. 1955, Godzilla Raids Again. So C to me is totally middle of the road. And I'm basing this sort of just on my enjoyment overall, but also based on Godzilla movies, which is why these ratings are going to flip around probably, because I've not seen many of them yet. I'll be honest with you, this is going to be higher than some people, but I'm like a very high B. Like, this would be a B plus for me. I don't know if I can quite go A. It had its flaws. I'm going to put it on B. Godzilla Raids Again, 1955. I'm going to write B+. So that way I know, like, oh yeah, if I feel like things need to move around a little bit, that one might move towards A. Because it's like a B+ for me. Finally, though, 1956, Godzilla... Is it Destroy All Monsters? Godzilla King of the Monsters. 1956, Godzilla King of the Monsters. Real quick, this is not... It is a new movie, but it's Americanized of the very original Godzilla. Raymond Burr is the main actor. He's an American news reporter. And if you've not seen it, I believe Terry Morse directed the new parts. And of course, the original was the original director. If you've not seen it, the idea is Raymond Burr's character is an American reporter, and you're supposed to believe he was there the whole time of the original Godzilla movie. And they even have him interact with the main characters. All the main characters. The love triangle and the esteemed scientist, whose name I'm also not going to try to pronounce. The guy with the great mustache. You know what I mean. They have him interact with all those people. And that's when it gets a little weird for me, because they'll like have those characters' backs to the camera, so it's really not them, you know. And then they dub over it, and that's what got me. I think the Americanized 1956 Godzilla would be better if you've never seen the original. Problem is, I watched the original twice, by the way, and like over the period of the last 2 weeks, I've watched the original twice. And so my ranking of S tier is not just my initial instinct, it's after 2 viewings, which I know many people have probably seen it 100 times, but after 2 viewings, it's S tier. This one, I think it would be rated a little better for me if I hadn't seen the original. But it really threw me off when they dubbed the voices of the main characters, and I already know how they sound, so it's just weird. That being said, it was done better than I thought it would be overall. I mean, I kind of pushed back against the whole idea that you need an American in it for American audiences to care. And it did feel like, if you want to be really cynical, it felt like they're trying to whitewash this Japanese movie by literally pretending like this American was involved in it the whole time. And like he was important. Like he did some things that I think did kind of affect how things went. Having seen the original first, that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But considering it came out in 1956 and how different those times were and how American-centric America certainly was, I actually think it could have been done a lot worse. I think they tried. It's ultimately, the whole message of the movie is totally changed. But at the same time, I think they tried to not ruin it. Like, I really do feel like they tried. I think Raymond Burr puts a great performance in. Like, he does a great job. And some of the things were believable, like that he would have been there. And it's cool to have that perspective. But ultimately, we don't have any new shots of Godzilla. It's reused footage. We don't have anything like fun added. It's all just actors in a room pretending that they were there originally. So it was kind of clever how it was done. I think it was done pretty well. And it's crazy how much it just kind of changes the whole movie. But I think it loses about 75% of the power and impact of the original. And the only thing it really adds is that you don't have to read subtitles. And in that sense, it's kind of cool because it is pretty good acting. But again, there is still some dub work. And when they choose to do the dub work, that's not great. But the actual acting where the actors are there, both the Japanese ones and the American ones, that's actually done well. So it's better than just like watching a bad dub of a Japanese movie. It's not that bad, but it's kind of like along those lines. I don't know. I think Godzilla King of the Monsters, 1956, it was an interesting experiment. I don't think it ever needs to be done again for a Godzilla movie. The original Godzilla is an S tier. This one, oh man. I liked Raids Again a lot more. It was better than I thought it would be. But I'm still like D+. Like, I don't think I can go C. It's between C and D, but unless things get really bad, I'm going to go with D. Godzilla, King of the Monsters, the Americanized original Godzilla, is a D. So far we have Godzilla King of the Monsters, D. Godzilla Raids Again, a B, a high B, B plus. And then the original is S tier. And I feel like that's about how I feel as far as the quality of these, how far they are apart from each other. Original, sequel, Americanized version. But both the sequel and the Americanized version were better than I thought they would be. And this one is actually more about right here, if I'm being honest. But the original still stands apart by a good margin. Whew, there we go. Half an hour. That's long enough. That's the first 3 Godzilla films, if you count the Americanized version as one of the 3, in my ranking. And we'll continue on to see how this Godzilla noob ranks the Godzilla films.